explain what they are in a 90s flashback. Michelle.
Yes. Mike, it's a bond market investor who protests inflationary fiscal policies. In other words, too much government spending by selling bonds, and therefore increasing yields. And the word vigilante is used because it highlights the ability of a bond market to restrain government spending. When interest rates on government bonds go up, a government has to divert more and more money to paying interest on its debt and away from the projects and the policies for which they had borrowed the money in the first place. The term was coined in 1993 by a frequent guest on CNBC, Ed Yardeni, who, by the way, will be on Power Lunch later today. And the reason why there's talk of the bond vigilantes returning is threefold. First of all, the Federal Reserve, other major central banks, they are reducing how many bonds they buy. There's also the tax cut, at least in the short term, means less revenue for the government to use to pay back their debts. And then this week, very important, the decision to do a big spending package, which means deficits of more than $1 trillion per year in the coming years. Now, still, the bond vigilantes haven't reared their head in the U.S. since Bill Clinton's time as president. However, they were certainly out in force during the European financial crisis, which was driven by government overspending. The power of the bond market often surprises politicians who are unfamiliar with it. There is a very funny quote from James Carville, well-known advisor to Bill Clinton. He told the Wall Street Journal in 1993, quote, "I used to think if there was reincarnation, I wanted to come back as the president or the Pope or a 400 baseball hitter. But now I want to come back as the bond market. You can intimidate everybody." We may be feeling that right now, Mike.
Yes, maybe getting intimidating again, Michelle. By the way, there's also a very colorful quote from Bill Clinton about bond traders from the same era that you can look up, but the same idea. So thank you for that, Michelle. For more on these markets, which are kind of rolling over, the Dow has just turned negative. We're joined by Krishna Mamani, Oppenheimer Fund CIO and head of fixed income, and Jim Caron, Morgan Stanley fixed income managing director. Thanks to you both. Krishna, is this actually the world we're in, where interest rates are going to kind of take flight and, in fact, they're going to try and rebel against this inflationary future or central banks or anything else, or not yet?
Not yet. I think the bond vigilantes left the continent and are nowhere to be found, mixing my metaphors here. But the point is, inflation is really missing in the world. And until that rears its ugly head in a meaningful way, not just a modest spike, I don't think bond market is going to be really in a big tizzy. Clearly rates are rising. The Fed is tightening policy, and that has to have impact on equity markets. But it's not the end of the world by any measure, as you were talking about with respect to the credit markets. The credit markets are telling us that from a fundamental standpoint, things are actually working out quite nicely.
How quickly could that change? And I ask because just this morning, Tyson, for example, came out and they said